This is the 3D print we're going to do today. This is a file that I downloaded off of MakerWorld, and I modified it to use clear PLA for the water instead of resin like the designer used. And so let's begin. All right, the first thing we need to do is download the file from MakerWorld. I will include the link in the details section of this video. And so we'll download the 3MF file. And I'll just download it to my download folder. Okay, and I have Snapmaker Orca open. I'm going to come to the prepare, and I'm going to make sure that we've got filaments in our filament section here that we plan to use. I'm going to use blue for the duck pool, and I'm going to change to white. This is going to be the water. I'm going to clear filament for that, and I usually use PLA silk profiles, print with transparent filament. And then our yellow for the duck, we're going to just use a generic PLA. The black for the eyes is going to be a generic PLA, and then we are also going to need an orange for the duck's bill, also with generic PLA. We're not going to need 6 filaments. And so now we are going to come up to File, and we are going to import. You don't want to open the project, you want to import it. And we're going to import the 3MF file. And then this is the file that we downloaded from MakerWorld. Now it's not going to recognize the fact that on MakerWorld it was on 3 separate plates, so we're going to add a couple of more plates. And then we are just going to move the different items to the plates that we want. And we'll move the ducks here. Now we're going to have to remap. It added a filament here, and so we want to remap this. This one we want to remap to this color, and this one we will remap to yellow. So that way we've got our ducks here with the bill, and I want the pool to be blue, so that is okay. Now in this case we don't need 2 yellows, so I am going to merge this with number 3 so that we keep our number of filaments to a minimum. Now I am going to try and put some eyes on one of the ducks. I can hold down the scroll button on my mouse to move this from underneath the color palette there. And I'll really zoom in here. The color I'm going to want for the eyes is black. I'm going to select the circle tool type, and then I'm going to make this the size that I want for the eyes. And I'm just going to experiment, do a single click, try and make it the same level, and let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape, and I'm going to delete the 2 ducks that don't have the eyes, and then I'll just select this one, and I'm going to clone it a couple of times. So now we have our 3 ducks. I'm going to go ahead and file, save this project as, and I'm going to save it into my Snapmaker U1 folder. And so I'm going to save it as duck pool. Now something I'm going to want to try and do is, normally the way this file is intended to be done is that you print out the pool, you print out the ducks, and then you use resin to fill the pool with water and then place the ducks in it. What I want to try and do is I want to try and use some transparent PLA for the water and duck everything together at the same time. And so I will walk you through how I'm going to attempt to do this, and we'll see how it works. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to take our duck pool here, the one with the keychain. We are going to right click and we are going to export as one STL. And I'm going to export it as duck pool STL into my downloads folder. Okay, and I have opened Tinkercad in my browser, and I am going to create a 3D design. And the first thing I like to do is I like to change to a flat view, orthographic view. And now I'm going to come to Import. I'm going to choose a file. I'm going to go to my Downloads folder. And here is the duck pool. So I'm going to import that. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to press Control and D on my keyboard, and that is going to duplicate the pool. And I'm going to change this into a hole. Now I'm going to click and drag a cube out. And what I'm going to want to do is cut out a pool that is going to fit. So I'm going to use the work plane tool, and I'm going to click and drag it to the bottom of the pool. And then I'm going to select my cube and press D on the keyboard to put it up to this temporary plane. Now I'm going to get rid of this temporary plane just by clicking and dragging out to here. But now when we do a front view, you'll notice that, let me hide this, that we are now on the level of the bottom of the pool. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to come to the top view. I'm going to size this so that it is covering our pool. And I want it to be about the height that the water's going to be. So I'm going to lower this down to right there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these, and I am going to group them. Okay, now that's put some things in the corner here that I don't really want. So, and probably what would be easier is to drag a cylinder out to cover all these extra little pieces out here that I don't want. So I'm dragging some holes out. I'm going to select everything and I'm going to group it. And that gets rid of those extra little pieces. I'm going to change the color of this to white so that we know that this is the pool. And we are now going to align these together. And to be able to see it, I'm going to make the pool transparent so that I can see through it. So I can position this. So I will look at the left view. I'm going to use my keys to just try and align this. And then let's check it this way. Okay, that looks good. So I'll look at all the different directions. That looks like it's lined up well. And I'll turn off the transparency by typing T on the keyboard again. So now we have our water in here. And they are actually two different items. All right, and now we are ready to export the STLs. You want to be careful at this point, you don't move them. I'm going to select just the pool water. I'm going to select Export as an STL. And I will export this as Duck Pool Water Tinkercad. And then I am going to select just the pool. I'm going to export, and I'll export this as Duck Pool Tinkercad. Okay, and now we are back in Snapmaker Orca. We are going to add a plate. I'm going to come up to File, and I'm going to import, and I'm going to import those two files we just exported from Tinkercad. So that is the pool and the water. And so we're going to open it. And we do want to load this as a single object with multiple parts, so we'll say yes. And so now when we come over here, if you're in Global View, switch to Objects View. And you can come down here and you'll see we have our Duck Pool Tinkercad and the Water Tinkercad. Now this is where you can change the colors. And so if I want to change this to my clear, I just type 2 on the keyboard, because this is where I'm going to have my transparent filament. And so now you see we've got our two waters. I'm just going to click on one of them, right click, and I'm going to clone it, and I'm going to clone it 3 times. And I did not have this plate selected when I cloned it. If I had, it would have cloned to the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select 3 of them, move them down to here, and I'm going to move them so that they are in the water. Okay, now I'm going to need to reposition the ducks the way I want them to be. So I'm going to select them one at a time. And actually, the first thing I need to do is I need to select everything. Whoops. I'm going to right click and I'm going to assemble. You're going to want to assemble first, otherwise those ducks are going to constantly want to drop down to the bed. And so you need to assemble it first. Now we can select our individual ducks from the object view over here. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to position them. So we're going to move it and we're going to raise it until they're floating in the water. And then we can also rotate it so that we can rotate them. And then you can just position the ducks like you want. And I want to make sure that the water has some substance. So I'm going to come back to prepare again. I'm going to come to global. Actually, no, I'm going to come to objects. And I'm going to select the water. And I'm going to set the infill density here, try 30%, and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that'll be good. This amount of infill in the water, just to give it some texture underneath the water. And you can see how far the ducks go underneath the water here. They're going under several layers. Now we're ready to slice it. And one thing I think I would like to do, you can see where it's putting these white seams. What I am going to do is I'm coming back to prepare, and I am going to select everything, and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees, and then I'm coming over to global, And I want to find, let's search for seam. I want the seam position, and I want to change that to back. And then let's reslice this. Another thing, this is quite a big prime tower. So I'm going to come to multi-material, and I like to set mine to 15 for the width and 15 for the prime volume. And that will cut down on the waste of the prime tower. Okay, and to make it a little easier and cause less confusion, I want to swap the filament 4 and 5 because the black is the one we're going to be swapping out at our pause. And so I want the first 4 filaments to be the actual ones that are going to be on the machine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to orange, and I will change this to black. Now that has changed our little ducks over here, and so what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to come over here to Object View, and we're going to go to the micro ducts. We're going to come to the color painting, and what I'm going to do is remap the filaments. So I want to remap number 4 to 5 and number 5 to 4. And that way it should correct our ducts. And so that's how we can remap these filaments. And I'm doing this because I want my blue to be on spool 1, my white to be on spool 2, the yellow to be on spool 3, and the orange to be on spool 4. And then we're going to swap out number 2 at our pause point. Okay, and now what we want to do is at a certain time we were going to want to swap out our clear filament for the black filament. So in order to do that, we're going to add a pause to the print. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slice the plate. And then I'm going to find a spot where the white has stopped. So you can see here, this is still doing white. And I think at this point, the white has stopped. So we can safely change out the clear filament for the black filament. So I'm going to right click at layer 47 and I'm going to add a pause. And then we're going to reslice it. Now we're ready to send it to the printer. So I'm going to hit print, upload and print. My U1 is loaded up here. Now I want to make sure that I've got everything adequately mapped here. So the blue is 1, the clear is 2, the yellow is on 3, and the orange is on 4. The black is what we're going to swap to. We're going to swap the number 2 filament, so we want to change this to number 2. And so that tells us that when it thinks it wants to print black, it's going to pull it from 2, and we have actually going to change it out at this point. So by the time it gets to the eyes on the duck, the black is loaded in position number 2. I'm going to set it to auto leveling. I'm also going to do a time lapse, and then we're just going to send it to the printer. Okay, and I use a filament dryer on my machine. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use some Creality blue in the number 1 position. So I will just load this up. Until it comes out here. Number 2 position, we're going to start out with our clear filament. And what I do when I load it, since this is, let's see, I think I need to turn on my machine. I like to pull this out because there is some resistance when it's pulling from here, and the feeder motors, these feeder motors are not very strong. And so I like to pull out enough filament so that it can feed it all the way. So this is number 1. And it hasn't started up yet. Now it has, so this is number 1. There we go. And this is number 2. And I pull out enough so that it can feed. You can see I didn't pull out quite enough. It's struggling. And then I'm going to put the yellow in position 3. Okay, and then I loaded the yellow and the orange into the 3 and 4 position. And loaded those into the feeder the same way I did the 1 and 2. And our machine is paused, so I'm going to hit home here. I'm going to go to the filaments, and I'm going to unload filament 2. And as you can see here, it has paused at the area where the water is done, and it started printing the ducks. Okay, and the filament has been unloaded. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to carefully pull it out all the way. And I'm going to go ahead and trim off the end. And I'm going to come over here to my filament dryer and I'm going to unload it. And I'm going to add my black filament. And then what we're going to do is we are going to go to loading mode. We're going to load number 2. Oh, forgot to edit. So the filament type is generic PLA. And we'll save it. Now we'll load. Okay, the loading has been done, so I'm going to press done. I'm going to back out of here, and I am going to restart the run. So now it's resuming the print. And here's the finished print. I'm printing another one now where I have the infill for the water set to 10%. This was 30%. And I'm going to want to see the difference between the 10% and the 30%. And this was the prime tower on my Snapmaker U1 printer, which was the total amount of waste that was produced in printing out this particular model. And here you can see the 10% infill versus the 30% infill. The 10% is on the left and the 30% is on the right. I personally prefer the 10% infill because it makes the water look a little more translucent. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.